Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is the Casual Friday podcast. In this week's podcast, I have a finished project. I have an unfinished object that will remain unfinished until Finish It February. And I have a new work in progress that I'm really excited about and I think I'm having a really fun time with. I also want to share some completed spinning projects and talk about Finish It February 2026. So let's get started. So before we get started, I just wanted to mention that I was really sad to hear that Barbara G. Walker had died on Sunday, December 21st. She was 95 years old. She was an amazing woman. She has had a profound effect on me as a knitter. Elizabeth Zimmerman has had, and if I like Elizabeth Zimmerman's sort of attitude about knitting and being adventurous and learning and trying to figure things out and sort of her engineering mind when it comes to knitting. I didn't agree with Elizabeth Zimmerman on her love of knitting stockinette in the round or knitting a lot of garter stitch. It's not what I love to do. Barbara Walker was more, I felt more kinship, I think, with Barbara Walker, and I have books to prove it. So Barbara Walker is responsible for a number of treasuries of knitting patterns. Now mine have this binding on them because I took them years ago to Kinko's and had them cut off the binding and put in this so that I could lay these flat. So you can see by the number of little things I have that I refer to, this is within arm reach of my desk. This book, this is her, it's just called A Treasury of Knitting Patterns. They're all written patterns, there's no charted patterns, because this was 1969 or something like that, and they assume flat knitting. So if you want to use them in the round knitting or you like charts, you have to chart them yourself, and I often do. My favorite treasury of hers is the second one. It's much bigger. The first treasury has things like all of the most basic lace or the most basic knit purl patterns, the most basic cable patterns, plus a whole lot more. But the most basic of any sort of category, she will have that in this first treasury, but also a lot more. The second one, people were sending her stitch patterns in and she will acknowledge them. The second treasury is the book where in the abbreviations, the beginning of the book, she defines the term SSK. Barbara Walker invented the SSK. Prior to that, people would slip one as if to knit one, and then pass that slip stitch over. And a lot of people still do that, especially in the UK. Barbara Walker is American, and so it took a lot longer for things that she did to maybe make it across the pond. Those were her first two treasuries. Her third treasury was charted knitting designs. So this is the early 70s. You don't have computer software in your home with programs that can help you chart things. So she invented charting symbols that we use today using graph paper and pencils. The pictures in here, those were all done by hand. All of her stitch patterns are charted. She went so far as to invent closed cables like this, explaining how to do that. Another thing she did was invent mosaic knitting. So in one of these first two treasuries, she's got a chapter on mosaic knitting. And then she went and wrote a whole book about mosaic knitting and a charting system for it and explanation for how things work. She also wrote a book called Knitting from the Top. Top-down raglans knit in the round had been around since the 1930s. I have a book that explains how to do that. But that was really the only sweater that was like that. And so there were a lot of raglans were often knit bottom up flat in pieces, but oftentimes especially in the 70s, you could find top-down, and 60s, you could find top-down seamless raglan patterns. What she did was explain how to knit all kinds of things from the top, including all kinds of sweaters. She had two methods for knitting a top-down seamless sweater with set-in sleeves. And those two methods have been refined and adapted, modified over the years. And so a lot of the patterns that we use today use those methods, but tweak. I feel a deep debt of gratitude to her, and I'm sorry to see that she has died. She lived a very long life. She was not only a knitter, she was a researcher of all kinds of things. I remember when I first brought one of her books home, I was thinking, Barbara G. Walker, that name seems so familiar. And that's because I had a book on my shelf called Woman's Encyclopedia of Knits and Secrets. And she'd written a number of books about feminism as well. She was a deeply curious woman, very smart, and really knew what she was doing. And I'm sorry to see her go. So I have a project I want to talk a little bit about that I finished a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned it briefly in last week's end of year roundup of everything I knit in 2025, but I hadn't ever mentioned it in a real Casual Friday episode. So just wanted to show you this project, tell you a little bit about it, and that's it. So this is the hat that I knit for Sherry's grandchild-to-be, who will be born soon, I believe next month maybe, if I'm correct. I love knitting things for babies, and I haven't had anybody in my life recently who's had a baby. So I really wanted to knit a little wool gift for Sherry or her grandchild-to-be. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a boy or a girl, and also I didn't know if the parents were going to want gender-specific colors, so I chose something that's pretty neutral for a baby. It's got pinks and blues and greens and yellows in it. It was a fun project. I love knitting for babies. This is a free pattern. There are 3 different versions for the top part. All of the 3 have this on the bottom, which is a garter stitch band, and then this little decorative eyelet in garter stitch band, and then it goes into the crown. So one crown is, there are no decreases, it's just square, and so when you put it on the head, it has like little ears. Another is a regular crown that has a little bit of I-cord that sticks up. It's very cute. And then there's this one, which is the pixie version, which is always cute on babies as well. So I did this garter stitch in the round. This, you can see the end of round, beginning of round transition, which looks like a seam line. And I never try to hide this. You know, there are ways of hiding this, knitting helical garter stitch, and I just don't feel like it's worth it. This can go at the back of the head. It's obvious then where the front and the back of the head are, and it's a very tidy little line, and so I don't find a problem with that because that's how knitting works. I really enjoyed this, and I'm excited to hand this over. I've got 2 finished spinning projects to show you. This is Manx Loaghton. This is my favorite sheep. I love these sheep. They are so cool looking. They're from the Isle of Man, which is why that's Manx. They're brown sheep, and they have at least 4 horns. They could, apparently they can have up to 6. I haven't seen a picture of one with 6 horns. They're very cool looking. I just love their yarn. I love that it's a natural color. I do plan on dyeing this. I'm thinking I might dye it some kind of maroon type of thing. First time I encountered Manx Loaghton was in yarn. It was a Canadian yarn called Ancient something, and it was something that was dyed, and I just loved the yarn. So it was a mixture of Manx Loaghton and some other yarns, and you could kind of see the brown threads interspersed in there, and I just loved it. And so I did do a small sample of it in my breed study blanket. And then when I got my e-spinner that was a viewer sent to me, she was downsizing, and she had heard me mention that I was thinking about buying one. She sent one to me, but she also sent me a bunch of really nicely prepared combed top, like 6 to 8 ounces of a bunch of different ones, like 10, that she had gotten from like a breed of the month type of club or something like that. And so one of the things in there was this Manx Loaghton. And so it's enough to do something with. I'm going to put it up against my neck. I would say, you know, it's not merino, but it's very comfortable against my neck, which tends to be pretty sensitive. So I could make something more substantial out of this. It's possible I could divide it into two and like do an experiment where I dyed it 2 different colors. I could make hats for 2 different people out of this. So this is a 3-ply because I prefer 3-ply to 2-ply. And let me see what it is. I think it's probably like a worsted weight. So this thing tells me about what it is. So yeah, this looks to be a worsted weight, maybe even heavy worsted. It's a nice yarn, and I do think there's probably enough to do 2 hats with it. But I'd love suggestions. I'm thinking about like maroon or purple, something like that might be good colors for over dyeing. But let me know what you think. My second spinning project that I just finished the other day, I think on the 31st, way back in September, I was on a fiber trip and I stopped and I saw Trish from Fiber Love Diary when I was going to visit my family in Michigan. And she was showing me her dye lab, and I saw all the different bins that she had of different kinds of comb top for dyeing. And I saw she had Falkland, and I was like, oh, I love Falkland. We were talking about how much we love Falkland. And she said, oh, you want to dye some? I'm like, oh my gosh. So we dyed 8 ounces. It just came out beautiful, and this spun like a dream. And I loved the way that the bobbin looked when it was filling up with the different colors. You know, there were different shades. And so again, I wanted a 3-ply. It came out to be more of a marled result, but fairly consistent. They were, I think just about 8 ounces. So before I washed it, it fit into this slot right here, the 14, which is fingering weight. But I think after washing, because you know things bloom, it's more of a DK. So it's thinner than the Manx Loaghton, but not a lot thinner. So I mean, I feel like I can see the edges on either side of that, so that this is thinner than worsted. So I feel like this is a DK. But I really love the result, love the way it feels. And I do have 8 ounces. I have to figure out what I can use it with. The natural thing is, well, color work. But what color would be enough contrast with this to be able to use this other than something like cream? I don't know that I want a cream color sweater. Maybe one of the really light turquoise. I don't know. But I definitely want to use it. That is something that I am really wanting to do this year, is to actually use my Handspun. So if I'm spinning for a sweater, I'm spinning a sweater quantity, or if I'm spinning for a pair of socks, I spin for the socks. But when I have something like this or the Manx Loaghton, I just have the fiber, and it's really hard for me to then have the completed yarn and know what to do with it. I'm not going to make a cowl. I'm not going to make a shawl. Those are not things I would use. I want to make something that I would actually use and that would use up as much of this as would be possible, because I really don't want to have leftovers of this. I want to be able to use all that up. Suggestions about what color would work well as a contrast and would look good on me because I want to wear this for me. And that's the trick is, oh, I love this color, but then what goes with it? But I would love suggestions. I have a project that was behaving very badly. In other words, I was getting frustrated with it. I had the utmost patience for the longest time, and then I just hit that final thing, and that project has been put into a timeout until finish it February, which is only a month, and I will absolutely be ready to address this project at this time. But let's go to the overhead, and I can show you the source of my deep, deep frustration. So my number one thing that I like to achieve when I'm knitting a pair of socks with self-striping yarn is that the socks match each other. And so that means wherever I start the first one, I'm going to start the second one in the same place. One of the ways that I achieve that is I look at where there is a color shift from one color to another. And that's where I start my long tail cast on. I have one strand for the thumb using one color, and then the stitches that go on the needle, use the color of the new stripe. So then I have this little contrast edge right here. And then as I work through the sock and see how the color repeat plays out, I have a good idea of where this is going to be, like when I get to the end of the sock, how much yarn I have to wind off in order to get to the beginning of the repeat for the second sock. What I didn't realize when I started this sock, because the picture on the label was about this big, was that there was this blue color in there. I thought it was just the gray and the dark gray, light gray and dark gray. I did not see this color in it. And so as I was, as I knit the leg, I want to see, how long is the color repeat. And usually the color repeats on most yarns are about 3 or 4 inches, and they start to repeat before you get to the heel. Other times they might last for the entire leg. So if I knit a leg for the 6 or 7 inches, I have had that happen where the entire leg is one repeat and then it starts over again. So then I have the decision to make about, do I continue with the yarn for the heel, or do I use a contrast yarn or a different part of the ball for the heel and then rejoin when I start working in the round again? I have that choice. So when I saw how long this repeat was, and I could see on the label, it looked like maybe they'd used a short row heel. It didn't look that closely, but I could tell it wasn't a heel flap and gusset. And so I thought, oh, I'll do a short row heel. The problem was I got to here and I started doing the short row heel, and in the first half of the heel was almost completely this solid blue, and then it was going to shift to the stripe. And then at the end of the heel, then I would be like somewhere probably in here. And so it would have been maybe blue, light blue, and the dark gray stripes, and then it would have gone into this. But I just wasn't sure what it's going to look like, and I thought it would be weird looking. I took the heel out, then I tried a plain heel, which is like an afterthought heel, but it's done when you get to the heel. So I thought, well, maybe it would look better if instead of having half of it blue and then half of it striped, if you had the blue going, light blue going around and then moved to the stripes. And I didn't like that any better, and was still going to have the weird issue what was going on in the front. I took the heel out again, and I just continued on working the leg. I still had the opening for the heel, but I continued with the cut. So I had uninterrupted colorway going all the way down, and you can see that this is how long the repeat is from here to here. And so I finished the sock continuing on, so you can see that the toe is ending at this point right here, just a little way into the second repeat. I wanted to know how many repeats there were in this yarn, because it's Lang Jawoll. It says it's 100 grams, but that's the total weight that includes the reinforcement thread, spool of reinforcement thread, which weighs 10 grams. So it's really only 90 grams. So I was winding it off to see how many repeats there were. And what it is that there's 3 full repeats, and then there's part of a 4th repeat. You don't get to the blue in the 4th repeat. You get somewhere in here. So there might be like 3.5 repeats. With the second sock, I can get through all of this and through the toe as well, with repeat number 3 in the beginning of the partial, repeat number 4. And then for the heel, I can use repeat number 2's blue section for both of them. And so that I can start at one end of the striping sequence for one sock working toward this part. And then for the second sock, I could start at this end working toward the big blue section for that heel. So the heels will match pretty well. They will probably be slightly different, but that's okay. It's the heel, but the entire beat will match. So I had to do this heel 3 times before I got it right. So that was a little frustrating. And then, I wound off all the yarn, figured out I was going to have enough, wanted to do this wedge toe, and I'm using a version that's a little bit wider. It's called the 4-3-2-1 toe, where you do your first decrease round, and then you work 4 plain rounds, and then you do the next decrease round, and then 3 plain rounds, and then decrease 2, decrease 1, decrease, and then you just do all decreases in a row until you have about 1/3 of the stitches that you started with. So I did that. I was doing that, and I thought, oh no, I think this is going to be too wide for my friend Felicia. So I ripped it back, and I decided to do a long round toe, which takes more length, and so I had to rip back more. And then as I did that, I realized this is going to be too narrow for her feet. So I ripped it back again. I realized what I was going to do to begin with was the right choice. So I completed that, and then I went to the section where the blue was, and I did the heel. And even though I kept taking row gauge, it kept shifting a little bit. And so then the foot ended up 1/2 inch longer than I wanted it, which is why I like to do the heel first. Because then as I get toward the toe, I can make sure and I can adjust things. So I had to rip the toe out again, and I already grafted it, ripped it out again, ripped back an extra 1/2 inch, and then re-knit the toe, and then I got the foot the length I wanted. So that was really frustrating. It was the heel 3 times and the toe 3.5, 4 times. And I thought, well, at least I've worked it all out. And so when I do the second sock, it'll be pretty smooth sailing. So I was working down the leg of the second sock, and I was getting toward the leg, and I was counting my rounds. So I count my rounds on the first leg so that so I know how many, and I make a note of it. And as I get toward that on the second one, I will adjust it in order to actually end the leg exactly in the same part in the colorway. So I don't mind being a round or 2 off, or half a round, you know, like a little bit off to fudge it in order to make them match exactly, because I'm weird that way. And what I was noticing was that I was like 4 rounds or so off, and that was so weird. And so then I actually took a look at what was on my needles. And what you will see is that I have an extra stripe in this sock compared to this one, that I thought I was starting at the end of like this big black section, that's where this was beginning. I just didn't count up the stripes and pay attention. And as I got toward the toe, you know, it looks a little different anyway. It's not in ribbing, and it's changing size and all of that. I just didn't notice that this was only 4 stripes. So I started this at the beginning of the striping sequence, and I should have started it a little later. And I'm so persnickety about this. I don't want them to be different, to be visibly that different. But I also could not tolerate the thought of ripping this all out and starting it over again after all I'd been through. So this sock went into Finish It February Timeout Jail. I will be picking it up again in February, but until then it is in jail, and it is thinking about what it has done before I'm going to speak to it again. In response to being deeply frustrated by a project that I had intended to complete this past week, I started a new project. Another baby project, because those are always fun, and this is one I had never done before, but I'd been wanting to do for a couple of years, actually, probably 6, 7 years I'd been wanting to do this. And so let's go back to the overhead, and I'll show you what this project is that I'm having so much fun with. Way back, I think it was in 2019, because it was before the pandemic, I was at a knitting group, and one of the people in the knitting group was making this sock yarn balloon animal. I don't remember which one they were making, but they showed me, they had one of these little things, and it's got the cards in them that show the different animals, and it has all the directions for how to make them. And so you're essentially creating this balloon thing with increases and decreases. You're stuffing it along the way, and then you end up with this long tube, and then you twist it and everything back into this creature. And I was fascinated by this, and I tried looking it up, and again, this is 10 years after these patterns came out, and I could not find it anywhere. And then a couple of years ago, our guild had one of its garage sales. And so the garage sales, the things that they sell come from donations. Sometimes there's people clearing out their stash. Once in a while, it's somebody who used to have a yarn shop, and they, you know, there'll be a pile of knitting needles and all kinds of things. And one of the things that they had was this book right here, and then a whole bunch of little kits. So if you have this, you could use whatever yarn you wanted. It tells you, you know, how many colors you need, and you could do this. But if you have the kit, then you've got this one's for a penguin, and it's got the colors that you need and the quantity that you need. But the pattern isn't in here. You'd still need to get the pattern. And so I bought the whole grocery bag full of them. And so there are duplicates of some of the animals, and then there's some animals where there's no kit for it. Like there's no poodle, and there's the monkey I really loved, and there's no monkey. But I think most of the other ones there's at least one kit for. So I just love these, but I've had these in this grocery bag for a couple of years, and I haven't made any. Making one of these for Sherry's grandchild is perfect opportunity to try one of these kits out. You start at this balloon tip end, which I think is just so ingenious. You start with 15 stitches, and then you're decreasing, 3 each round until you're down to 6. And then you go into the increases and decreases. You stuff this, and then you move on to the next one. And then the balloon tie is finished off by you weave in the yarn tail and stick it in up here, and then you wind the yarn around a bunch of times and then stick it back in. But it just is so cool how it works and how much it looks like a balloon tie. So I have been reading the directions on how to put this thing together once it's done, and it's confusing because I can't actually do it yet because it's not finished, and I've never seen it done before. I've never done it before, and so I know that once I have all the parts complete, it will make more sense. One of the reasons I can't walk myself through it is because, so here's the tail, the 2 legs, back legs, body, 2 front legs. This is one of the ears. I just started the second ear, and then there'll be the head and the trunk. And the way that you start putting it together is with the front legs. And so the very last step is doing the back legs. And so I have been able to understand what's going on. So they'll tell you, these connecting points, bring these up together, and then whatever is above that gets wrapped around, and then it gets pushed through. So now it's connected, and so then you can see how the little tail comes out of the body. So I think the first step to actually putting this together is to get these 2 legs together and wrap the ear around and get the head through. But I can't understand how the ears are done, and I won't until this whole thing is done. But this is really fun. One thing that I worry about is that at some point a little kid is going to be playing with this and have it, come undone, and the parents are going to be like, now what? So I do plan, once I understand how to do this, filming a little video and sending them a QR code that will take them to that video so they can see how to put it back together if they ever need to in the future. And just so you know, I will put the name of this designer on the screen and also down in the show notes. Her name is Sid Handspun, so it's capital C, lowercase I, capital D, Handspun Designs. She's a local Twin Cities designer, apparently. I do think this came from a local yarn shop that closed at some point because there was just so many of the little kits. So I mentioned Finish It February, and many of you longtime viewers are going to know what Finish It February is. You know that it's coming up, but some of you who are newer or maybe only have been sporadic viewers on my channel may not know what Finish It February is. What it is an opportunity to get reacquainted with your UFOs, your unfinished objects. not necessarily your current whips, your works in progress that you're actively working on, but your UFOs, the things that you shoved to the side and maybe you've forgotten about, or you haven't wanted to face, or you made a mistake in them and you're like, so you put it to the side. Could be any reason, but they get shoved to the side and they never get pulled out again. And oftentimes you just completely forget about them. You're not even aware of their existence, but they're taking up space. So this is sort of a decluttering exercise in a way. And oftentimes it does end up being an active decluttering exercise where you're like, I don't want this. I hate this yarn. Throw it away, give it away, donate it, whatever, get it out of my space. That might be one objective. Another is just go, oh my gosh, I completely forgot about this pair of socks I was knitting. I love them, but I put them to the side because I started something else as a gift and then I never went back to them, and then they've been in a drawer for 5 years. It could be something like that. Or it could be projects where you don't hate them. Like you don't want to get rid of them. You don't want to throw them away, give away, rip them out. But you also don't quite want to finish them. Like you just have ambiguous feelings about them. So it could be any one of those three things. But the idea is to see what they are and face them and then make some decisions about them. And anything that you do in February toward finishing a project, fixing a project, getting rid of a project, getting it just out of your life, that is making progress towards reducing the size of your UFO pile. So I started doing this back in 2016, I think. It was, I had a really small office. It's probably half the size of the one that I'm in now. And I just had so much yarn, so much stuff, I couldn't put things away. And so I was really was decluttering. I got rid of half my stash. I donated it to the Textile Center garage sale. I reorganized all my books, and then I pulled out all of my UFOs. And I really wasn't aware of how many I had because I tend to be out of sight, out of mind. And so I was just looking in any drawer or bag or cubby, anything, and pulled it all out. And I had more than 40 unfinished projects. I think there was 44, which I couldn't believe it. It made me a little sick. People have heard this story many times. But then I realized at that time in my life, I had oftentimes knit that many projects in a year. A lot of them were small, but a lot of these were small. And they were already all started. And so I decided that in 2016, I wasn't going to start anything new for me. I would knit new things if they were a gift and they were small enough that I knew I could work it all the way through and it wouldn't become another UFO. So I did knit some new things during 2016. But most of the UFOs were just things that I thought would be fun to knit, and then I had gotten shoved to the side. There were a few of them that it's like god-awful yarn, or I had no idea what it was, or I didn't like it, and I just took the needles out and threw that yarn away because it was just a little bit, and I didn't like the yarn, and there was no point in keeping it. And then there was a project where the hat had been knit, and then the little details that were supposed to be all sewn up and added to the hat, and I just didn't have the fortitude to do that. But the person who told me about that pattern made a lot of those, my dental hygienist. So I took it to her my next cleaning, and I said, you can say no, but I know that you knit a lot of these, and it just needs assembly, and you can do whatever you want with it. And she thought about it. She goes, yeah, I could do that. It would take me about an evening to do. And so she took it. And I was glad to be rid of it because I was not going to roll up a bunch of garter stitch roses and sew them on. I just wasn't going to do it. And then I found a lot of unfinished sock projects, which surprised me because I think of myself as not having second sock syndrome. One project after the other. So there was so many of them. And the way that I approached them that year, and I am not telling anybody who's doing Finish It February for the first time that they need to spend the whole year finishing all of their UFOs. February is just a time to realize what you have and maybe come up with a plan, get rid of some things so that the pile is smaller. If you can get rid of some things, your pile is smaller. The way I approached it was I looked at what is the very easiest thing to finish. I had a hat that had 2 yarn tails that needed to be woven in. Wove them in, bang, it's done. I had a dishcloth, same thing. 2 ends that needed to be woven in, done. So that eliminated that pile, and it meant I didn't have to store it in my office space anymore too. So getting things out of there. And I evaluated everything based on, would I be excited to work on this? There were a lot of things that I was like really wanting to work on. And then there were a few things that I was like, I don't know. And so I just put those away again. Those are the ambiguous ones. So I did that in 2016, and I think I finished more than 30 of those projects. So a handful of them got thrown away or given away. I finished 30 of them, and then there were a handful left over that I really felt ambiguous about. And then in 2018, when I started doing the Casual Friday podcast, it had been a year since I'd done that year of finishing things, and I thought, finish it February would be a good thing to do. Just once a year, address my UFOs. And I'd already accumulated 15 in like the year and a few months since I had finished doing my year of finishing things. I had accumulated another 15 projects. And so I looked at those, and some of them I decided to finish, and some of them I decided they were done as they were. And then I addressed those ambiguous ones, and every year more and more of those I just like, nope, I am never going to finish these. So they tended to be things I like the idea of, but I didn't like the actual knitting of, and there wasn't a defined recipient that I had promised it to. I tend to be very good at finishing things that are for other people. Personally, that's just me. So that's what it's about if you want to start thinking about it. And over the years, there are some of my viewers who have participated every year, and they've really reduced their pile. What many of us do is fix it February. And so people are darning socks, people are fixing holes in sweaters. I've done things like added a belt to a cardigan that didn't have any closures. I've fixed the neck on a favorite sweater because I never liked the neck. I have put new buttons on a cardigan, like I'd lost one and then I didn't even like the original buttons anyway, so I got buttons I liked better. So anything to improve something that would make me actually want to wear it or use it in a better way, those are things I often use Finish It February for. Some people just decide to go through their craft room and really clear things out and figure out what they have, not just their projects, but all kinds of things to kind of clear things out. So I always create 2 discussion threads in my Ravelry group, and I will leave links down below. The first one I'll start probably today. I'll start it up, and people can start posting in there what they're planning to do for Finish It February. You can post your before picture, like these are all the things I want to do, and you can share as you finish things. You can post your pictures, all of that kind of thing. It's sort of like a bring your own project make along for the month of February. And you can participate in that if you want, or you can just do your own thing in your house and not communicate with anybody about what you're doing. It's up to you. The second discussion thread I will not open until February 1st. And that one is if you are completing something that you would like to share for the video montage that I do once Finish It February is over. I always do a special video just showcasing what all the viewers who have participated in Finish It February have completed. So that one is a no chat thread. You just post a photo, you post when you started it, what it is, pattern and yarn information, who it's for, that kind of information you can post in there. And by posting in there, you are giving me permission to use your photo in the video montage. Anything in the chat thread stays in the chat thread. I don't touch anything that's in there. So you can choose whether you want to post anything, or if you only want to post in one place versus the other, or if you want to post in both. So that's what Finish It February is, and I will probably remind you about it again in a couple of weeks. And then right before February, on the January 30th, Casual Friday will kind of be the kickoff for it, because otherwise there won't be a February video until the middle of the month. So I hope you will join me. It's a lot of fun. I always actually really look forward to Finish It February because I've just have myself in the mindset that these things are going to get done, where in the middle of the year, I'm like, I really should do this. I don't want to do this. But I'll do it in February. And I really do. So I hope you'll join. Well, that's it for this week's Casual Friday. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below, or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rox Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.